When you look at Part 1...
I'll call the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I rise to take a call on Part 1. Part 1 at Clause 3 establishes the Callaghan Innovation Centre, as it's now going to be called, and provides for it to meet its main objectives and functions, which actually aren't contained in Clause 3. But to make sense of Clause 3, you have to, sir, refer to the main objective, functions and operating principles of the Callaghan Innovation organisation, which are referred to at Clauses 12 and 13. Sir, and they're listed, but still in very general terms, to be its main objective is to support science and technology-based innovation and its commercialisation by businesses, primarily in the manufacturing sector and services sector, in order to improve their growth and competitiveness. And then its functions are listed over about 2 pages on pages 8 to 10 of the bill. Mr Chairman, one of the points that was made by a submitted to Select Committee, which is referred to in the Minority report from the Labour Party at Select Committee, is that if the objective of the government is to improve our performance in the world by transforming more products into high-value goods, also services, but in particular goods overseas, then the settings in the economy need to be right to facilitate that. And they made the point that the macro policy issues which are not addressed in this purposes section of the bill are fundamentally important. And those listed in the Minority report as a consequence of submissions to the Select Committee are the settings that get the money going into the right part of the economy. We have a tax system in New Zealand which is rare by developed country standards, which has a bias for certain classes of investment that don't grow our productive output overseas and have the effect of distorting investment into the parts of the economy that don't grow our exports, namely into land-based activities rather than to productive manufacturing adding of value. So if the government was serious about growing the innovative enterprises in our country, it would be addressing those macroeconomic issues which only a government can fix, because business can't fix them for themselves. And I would reinforce that point, that these purposes that are being established here aren't met by the bill because these gaping problems in the economic structure of our country refused to be addressed by this government. The other macro setting that was referred to by submitters was the fact that under New Zealand's Reserve Bank policy at the moment, our monetary policy, we give priority to inflation targeting and the control of inflation over and above every other factor by law. We require that inflation is, or the control of inflation is given primacy above everything else, and that includes factors like the currency. And we've heard time and again from some of these higher value exporters that they are suffering as a consequence of the overvaluation of the New Zealand currency. Just about everyone agrees it is overvalued. The IMF recently said it was overvalued to the tune of about 15%, and since then it's gone higher. And this legislation again does nothing to address that fundamental determinant of the competitiveness of our export sector, the overvaluation of our currency. So, Mr Speaker, whilst the Labour Party believes that it is important to bring forward innovation, to grow the breadth of our exports, which are too narrowly focused at the moment, although I certainly agree that our primary production sector is the most important sector of the New Zealand economy in terms of the value of our exports, that's most certainly true. It's also clear that New Zealand cannot make it in the world on the back of that primary sector alone, and therefore we need to grow the breadth of our exports by transforming more products into higher value products that we sell to the rest of the world, so that we might, for the first time in decades, cover the cost of our imports and interest through the value of our exports. So the objectives of this bill, to the extent that they are set out in this legislation, are laudable. No one disagrees that we I don't think anyone in this Parliament disagrees that we should be trying to help grow that sector of the economy which is not succeeding as well as it should at the moment by the conversion of more products into higher value products. The problem that we have with this legislation is we're really, Mr.
The Honourable David Parker.
We're not really clear how the government through this legislation achieves that purpose, because the legislation doesn't articulate that in any clear way. Some of the other concerns that were expressed by some of the submitters who did submit in a short period of time was that they weren't clear that this was necessarily going to result in additional effort in the New Zealand economy rather than replace existing effort through existing enterprises and institutions with the same effort being conducted through this new organisation. So that's one of the challenges for this new organisation, is that they truly do make sure that it is additive to what is already happening in the economy rather than just squeezes out what's happening elsewhere. Now, we already do have some really good examples of innovative companies in New Zealand, whether it's companies providing one product or companies that provide research and development expertise, and there are some very good examples of that, whether it's the Gallagher's Group or whether it's Scott Technology, service provider to other companies that are bringing forward new products, bringing forward new manufacturing processes or products which aid in the growth of our export business. And if a company like Scott Technology ends up finding itself competing against the Callaghan Innovation, which is, although Callaghan Innovation, if they end up competing with Scott Technology, then we're not necessarily going to be going forward. Mr. Speaker, there wasn't much to be found in this budget that increased the competitiveness of our export sector. The Advanced Technology Institute, or as it's now to be called, Callaghan Innovation, was an exception to that general failing from my point of view anyway, that failing in the budget, and for that reason the Labour Party will be supporting it. I do want to return to the process point that Nikki Kay addressed. I don't think there is any excuse for a 6-week submission period. How long has this been on the order paper since it came back from Select Committee? I can't really see from the paper that I'm looking at when this was... What's that? Has it just come back in a few weeks ago? Right, okay. Well, I can't see why there was a need to truncate normal processes this and allow submitters the time to actually think about the issues, to actually have the time to consider the issues and make a considered decision as to whether, one, they should submit, and two, if they were going to submit, what they should say in their submission. You can never know what you don't know, and therefore we will never know what deficits would have been shown in this legislation, what further ideas would have been brought forward by people who had the normal period to submit. The normal period for calling of submissions is 6 weeks. That enables people to consider, take advice, talk to their industry associations, talk about it with other people who are export, and come to a view rather than just have to commit straight off the mark to a response which would be ill-considered. Most people don't like making ill-considered submissions, and so faced with the choice of making an ill-considered submission or just letting it go past, most people in the end choose not to submit. That's why we should protect the processes that we have at Select Committee through the normal process. This is all the more important in a country like New Zealand, where we only have one House of Parliament, and therefore we're more reliant upon Select Committee processes to make sure that we don't make legislative mistakes than other countries that have two Houses of Parliament are. With those reservations, Mr. Chairman, I will take my seat, noting that the Labour Party supports the bill.
I call David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, I'm pleased to take just